Greetings, everybody. Welcome to United Lodge of Theosophists San Diego, here for the Aquarian series. This afternoon, this evening, the title of the presentation is The I, and that's going to be given to us by Truth Collins. Before our speaker, Truth Collins, gets started, I would like to read to you a few quotes. The first is from Hermes. The eye of the wise man is directed by him at will, and when at rest, is focused on infinity. This next one by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I am the eye with which the universe beholds itself and knows itself divine. And finally, from Mr. Louis Armstrong, I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And so we give to you our very own Truth Collins.
Hi there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. I've worked with lighting for years, and I thought a lot about this. And then I came across a very interesting article about Atlantis as a possible origin, and it has a lot of things about the eye in it. So I thought I would go over this article with you, and at the end of that, if there's still time, then I'll rattle off a bunch of trivia about the eye, which you might find interesting. So let me see. So this is a image by Eliphas Levi, and I always liked it because it shows kind of like you have the sevenfold nature of man. You have the Atmi, Buddhi, and Manas, like the higher mind, being as one triangle, and then you have the lower triad of the physical senses and prana, and the astral as a reflection of the higher. And so it's also the yin and the yang, in a sense. You have the light and the dark, and then you have the Ouroboros, which encircles them all. And so I'm basically, I didn't flip this image, but if we were to take this image and rotate it 90 degrees, and on one end you had consciousness or spirit, and on the other end you had matter, then it would be like that. So it's an analogy to the sunrise. So you could consider the east, the direction of the sunrise, as the source of awareness, or in a sense as monism, as the one. It all comes from the east, and it becomes the many in the west. So the west would be the direction of phenomena, of manifestation, and then in a lot of old world cultures they had a threefold model. So you had like the underworld, the middle world, and the upper world, and so the fourth principle of karma, which is desire in Blavatsky's sevenfold nature of man model, that in a sense is like a pivot. It could be an aspect of the higher mind, or it could be an aspect of the lower mind. And these are just objectified. They're not like, they're just adjectives. There's just ideas used to describe something by creating a range, a spectrum, like a palette. And so I'm going to go to the next. So the title of this article is The Akkad Environment Depicted by the Pyramid Texts, a comparison of the Atlas Basin hydrology during the Green Sahara time. And this is east of Egypt, somewhere around Algeria by the Atlas Mountains, near the Mediterranean Sea. And I went through and I highlighted just key phrases and words that I thought were significant within this. Let's see, it's not going next. Okay, let's see if it... So when we get to the diagram, you'll see that the Akhet is in the center between these two lakes. And here in this right, we have the Ankh symbol. And the Ankh symbol is associated with the goddess Isis and the dawn, because you had this tradition of the goddess of the dawn, the worship of the sun goddess in the morning time. And like the birth of the sun, it's a language of associations. It's not the way that we think of things today with how everything's objectified as the definition that you get. And then you find people arguing over the definition. That's not exactly what it is. That's not what it says. You know, it's literary. It's not literalism. It's literary. And so if you were to kind of like concretize something and make it into an object, you'd really lose out on most of reality, because there's a lot going on besides, you know, the objective part of it. And so, you know, with these two lakes, it's a cycle. It's not definite. There's a theme of recurring. So it's a constant travel from the east to the west every day, and then going and returning to the east. So in between these two, oh, you can't, oh, no, it's on the next one. In between these two lakes was a canal, and with the water, they formed a water city, kind of like other water cities around the world, like Lake Titicaca or something like that. You know, Venice, you know, there are various places around the world where there's water underneath the city. And I figure that most every city was centered around water. And if you look at images of cities, a lot of them had a structure that was round, and also that there were rings of roundness. You know, you had the inner section of the city, and there's another ring, and then another ring. And that pattern, like when most people, they're looking for Atlantis, they're looking for an objectification of it. They're looking for a specific place in a specific time, something that occurred, and we can objectively verify it through the scientific method that this is what it was. It's like they found Troy, and they want to say, hey, this is it. We found it. This was Atlantis. It was under the ocean. It was, you know, the Bermuda Triangle. It was off Greece. You know, people want to be right. And so, what we find when we look at the cities around the world is that they had the basic pattern of Atlantis. There are rings and circles in quite a lot of city designs. And so it's like, you know, it's right before our eyes that this motif or pattern is all around the world. You know, it's a very feminine symbol, because you'll see later in here that, you know, the idea of building a city on top of water is comforting. You know, you've got a water source and there's life. And so I'll go on in here. Yeah, so I went over the solar cycle, and so one of these lakes, let me see. Well, there's the theme of the frame. I'm just going to advance to the next. So we've read about the crossing of the sea in the Bible and parting the sea. It's a mistranslation of the Sea of Reeds. And here in this article, there is clearly a Sea of Reeds. And you see in the center here in this diagram, that is what resembles Atlantis. And it also resembles an eye. And you'll see that later there are various titles for these, like the Eye of Horus and whatnot. I'll read part of it. Look, she is coming, the beautiful West, to meet you with her beautiful tresses. And she's saying, welcome. I gave birth with rising horn, eye painted pillar, bowl of the sky. Your form is distinguished. Pass in peace, for have joined you, says the beautiful West about Eunice. So this is describing how birth direction is going to the West. So you're born in the East and manifest in the West. And here is a temple layout. And the serdab was, it's like where you would put up something that resembles the one who passed away. And what I want to point out here is that they have 3 sections. And those, I think have to do with the symbolism, the emphasis on 3 in the ancient world. So you pass from the afterlife into the field of reeds. It's like deep sleep. You're rejuvenated in deep sleep. And then when you wake up and you're kind of still asleep, you have a threefold model of the underworld, middle world, and the upper world. Those are the frames of reference in the ancient world. And then the Akhet is where Atlantis would be, and we'll see later. And then the Duat on the other side is like manifestation. So on the right we have spirit, and on the left we have matter. It's not going. Okay. So here, when we looked at the serdab, these 3 points here would be like false walls, and in the false wall you see that it's like a portal or a dimension, and so it's sort of symbolical. It's not physically something you can walk through, but it represents a portal. And I'll go to the next. So here from Wikipedia, the ancient Egyptians believed that the false door was a threshold between the worlds of the living and the dead, and through which a deity or spirit of the deceased could enter and exit. The false door was usually the focus of a tomb's offering chapel, where family members could place offerings for the deceased on a special offering slab piece in front of the door. So they were found on the west wall of a funerary chapel. Egyptians associated the West with the land of the dead. And here's the entry about the serdab, literally meaning cold water, which became a loanword in Arabic for cellar, is an ancient Egyptian tomb structure that served as a chamber for the Ka statue of a deceased individual. Used during the Old Kingdom, the serdab was a sealed chamber with a small slit or hole to allow the soul of the deceased to move about freely. These holes also let in the smells of the offerings presented to the statue. And so you'll see later that the lake to the west, the Duat, is a deeper lake, and it's known as the cool waters. And so we'll go forward. And I don't have all the context of all these memorized, but I'm just going to read through some of this. His mother, the sky, bears him alive every day like the sun. He appears with him in the east and goes to rest with him in the west. His mother, Nut, is not void of him every day. So Nut was the like the bull goddess and the goddess of the sky, and nourishing, and so associated with the stars. And so the stars are kind of like the source of our, like we're all stardust, as the expression goes. So during the night, the king also follows the sun through the Duat. So we're following the cycle of the sun. And it's a freshening process. So as you go through the cycle, it's refreshing. You have a long day, you're tired, and then you rest and you're refreshed and you come back. But it's also a symbol of rebirth. of childbirth. So it's dual symbolism. Um, and so the place in the center was also associated with not just the sun, but the sun disk. And also they referred to people, humanity, as sun folk, like we're all children of light. Because my professor at UCSB, Barbara Holdridge, she wrote this book called Veda and Torah, and she showed that in the West, there's a lot of visual emphasis, whereas in the Vedas, it's auditory, and so sound oriented. And in this, it shows very clearly a lot of visual orientation. Um, see, Nut gives you the way to the Akat, to the place where the sun is holding the sun disk. Worshipping the living one, Re Orkti, who rejoices in Akat, in his identity as Shu, who is the Atem, living forever, the living Aten, the great one who is Jubilee, Lord of the Ring Island, Lord of the Aten, Lord of the heaven, Lord of the earth, Lord of Aten's house. And so what you see is that there's such repetition. Like in the ancient world, they use a whole lot of repetition and variation, so that by repeating things so many times, you got the idea by hearing it a lot of different ways. I'll go to the next. So I want to show you on this page the hieroglyph for Naaket, which is the shoulder is underneath the sun, and that's the sun hieroglyph. And when it's orientated one direction, it's to the east, and when it's orientated the other direction, it's to the west. And I also found it interesting that the heart determinative hieroglyph is this water face. So there's a lot of emphasis on a place, and so the domain of the East has of the metaphysical, as opposed to the domain of the West, the physical, as domains in our culture. The metaphysical, like in alchemy, the upward pointing arrows are air and fire, and air symbolizes mind, and fire symbolizes spirit. And the downward pointing arrows are water and earth. And those of, the earth symbolizes the sensual and water symbolizes the emotional. And stereotypically, those have been associated with the feminine, because matter is from the Latin matri, which means mother. And the metaphysical, like being able to be the head of a church or have a spiritual authority, it's up until recently, that was the domain of men. And so you see that you see the abstraction kind of laid out from right to left as the sunrise and the sunset. But the domains are flipped in a way also because women tend to be mentally stronger, and men much more vulnerable to the arguments of women, in my opinion. And whereas men tend to be physically stronger. So that, so I'm gonna go on. So the sun folk of Heliopolis, because Heliopolis was a city in Egypt dedicated to the sun. Helios is sun, is Polis is city. Go forward. So there were two pillars at the center of the sun, and it's very much like an equal sign. So the equal sign is like the sun rays coming out of the light of awareness behind our bodies, the light of our eyes. We have two eyes, and therefore there are two pillars, which formulate an equal sign. And then the colon sign, which means like what is, it also has two dots. And so there are two obelisks in the center there. And they were dedicated to, let me find it. There's also a place of judgment there because it was a city, and they had to make decisions. I'm not
Truth.
Yeah.
Truth. I see a lot of text. Are you moving from slide to slide?
Yes.
So therefore, I don't think where you're talking about is this text anymore, right?
No, it's not on there.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
I didn't see it there. It'll probably come up later. So the sun city is also symbolized as sun's eye or God's eye. And the winding canal between the two lakes had a shape like a mouth. Isis was also known as associated with the egg. And so you have this dual symbolism where the shape of the sun is also the shape of an egg. And so whereas a place or disk has to do with a location, a where or what is it? It's there. So that's a location. So whereas the egg is associated with time. And so I'm going to go forward. So the egg also has a town determinative. So the egg signifies a city because it's kind of like from the offspring of the eggs, it multiplies. It's a symbol of fertility. And so let me see. Sorry. You see here that hieroglyph name for Isis has an egg sign, and she was known as Queen of the Egg. And so it reminds me of the springtime and the worship of Astarte and the association with Easter. So the difference between the two lakes is, of course, the water would come off the mountains and it would come down to the lake in the west, which was deeper and cooler, and it was a greenish color, and the lake to the east was more turquoise color, like the sky. And so the symbolism of the association of the sky with the metaphysical and the turquoise color, I think that's an old theme. And so one thing that they did was they also controlled irrigation in the Sea of Reeds. It became farmland. And so they had ways to control the water flowing in from the deep lake and coming through into the city where people drank water, and also to where they did farming. And so the other lake, they had multiple names. So the Duat was also known as Jackal Lake, and it was a place it was the realm of purification. So in life, through having a body and through having experiences, those experiences are purifying. They're terrifying also, that like they're petrifying, because a lot of things in life are scary, but through going through experiences, we can purify ourselves through hard work. And so the jackal, is a scary animal, and it devours and stuff. Um, so Horus is in the Duat Lake, and it says, Horus cleanses me in the Jackal Lake and releases my Ka from the Duat Lake. He purges the flesh of my Ka and of my body with that which is on the sun's shoulders in the Aket. And so I found it interesting that it said the spell was repeated 4 times because the number 4 is associated with the earth. And there were 2 green falcons in the Duat Lake. And also green was the color of the lake. And so the green falcon who follows the solar cycle between sky and the Duat, because while we're in the world, we also want to have the sky, the metaphysical, as a frame of reference, that we're not caught up in what's going on and we're just thinking that this is all sensual. You got the 5 senses and that's it. And we're reacting to everything. There's no metaphysical influence on our choices. We don't have any sense of detachment. And so the falcons flying through the air was a very significant symbol to remind us to have perspective and vision. And Horus' name literally means one who is above. And so you can see the association with the falcon and the sun, because the sun is also above us. So the shape of Duat Lake links the falcon through a likely personification of this lake, because the lake looks like a flying falcon. This lake is also like a jackal head facing the east. And we have an illustration next. There was a small lake with a shape just like a plumage. And in the pyramid text, the falcon's plumage is a divine symbol. Shu's signature headband includes green plumage. The king's traveling in the sky as a falcon. And so the bird is also like a symbolical of a king, because you have a high perspective. The falcon's flying is toward the west, following the sun's movement and over the cool waters, great green, just like the shape of the western megalake in the Atlas Basin. I have come here in advance of the flood's immersion. I am Sobek, green of plumage, with alert face and raised fore. With slight revisions to better reflect the original meaning, these 2 verses can be written as, I have come to the fore of the flood's immersion. I am Sobek, my plumage is green, my face is alert, and my fore snout is raised. And so Sobek was the crocodile, and the serpents, the nagas, the crocodile, all of those were associated with the feminine domain. The goddesses were associated with Python and Pythos, and for various reasons, like the snakes shed their skin and women have periods, and like the open mouth of a fish or a serpent or a crocodile is like a void. And I won't be more explicit than that. And also, the crocodiles are, the speech of stereotypes, the speech of women can just utterly destroy men, deflate them, or motivate them. And so there's all this bad talk about women and not allowing them to speak in the Bible, like sit down and shut up. And that's because of how powerful their speech is. And so in Buddhism, you have Maya. Maya was the mother of means illusion, but she's also the mother of the Buddha. So you have this dichotomy there too. You have spirit and matter. Buddha representing awareness and spirit, and illusion representing matter or the ephemeral. And so here we can see that Jackal Lake resembles a crocodile. And in between, there's this canal connecting the 2 lakes. And that's where the Ak is, and that's where the sun disk is, and the pillars. It's all right there where there's drinking water. So the name Sobek is derived from a causative of the verb to impregnate. And so we see again that it's associated with motherhood. Spread lake and cool waters. So here it gets more explicitly into describing how it has to do with rebirth and the impregnation of the mother by the father, by Father Sky impregnates Mother Earth in a sense. We see that theme here. A spreading of Nut, the sky over this, the western megalake spreads out from east to west, but the name spreading lake is most likely relating to the spreading of Nut, the sky over this lake. In the pyramid text, the sky and the Duat under sky are interconnected through Nu, the primeval waters. And so the word abyss, chaos means abyss. And so there's a lot of fear around chaos, and it's like a cave, darkness, the night sky, the ocean, the waters. These are all scary. They're all abyss, and they're dark, and you don't know how deep they are or how far they go. So it's taken that wrong way, that could be a fear of the feminine, a fear of the yin. Here, inundation is better translated as abundance, and so, instead of being afraid, this is actually a good thing. Therefore, when the undersky is mentioned in the pyramid text, it refers to Jackal Lake, Duat Lake. When the two underskies is mentioned, it refers to the western Jackal Lake and the eastern Stork Lake. The sky's doorway is opened, the cool waters door is pulled open for Horus of the Akhet at daybreak, that he might emerge into the field of reeds and become clean in the field of reeds. And so, that is probably about the interaction between the yin and the yang, and how it results in a transcendental perspective. Duat Lake is also called the Marsh of Life, which is the sun's resting place in the cool waters. The Great Lake is also an epithet used for Jackal Lake. And you could also say, well, maybe they used all these different concepts so people didn't get bored with it. So, they used to allow water into, there was something called the Nurse Canal, and that was, I believe, closer to the Green Lake. I'll read the full. According to the pyramid text, both the Nurse Canal and the lips of Stork Lake are the drinking places for the ox. This means that the Nurse Canal is connected to the lips of Stork Lake, the lips of the winding canal which surrounds the field of reeds. See further discussion in next section. Process of filling water to the winding canal and the field of reeds by opening the Nurse Canal, so that the king might be ferried to the Akhet for a rebirth with the gods. So you see the direction of rebirth is coming from the east, coming from the west back to the east. And so I will go on. The Nurse Canal is opened up, the winding canal becomes inundated, the field of reeds is filled, so that I might be truly ferried to that eastern side of the sky, to the place where the gods are born, and I am born there in my birth with them as Horus, as him of the Akhet. So the place of the birth canal, the place, reminded me of the pupil of the eye, because depending on what our pupil is focused on, that, where pupil means student also, but that's what we may learn about. And so that's like where spirit meets matters, the nexus point. And, so therefore the Nurse Canal is a waterway connecting the upstream Jackal Lake, Duat Lake, to the Akhet, and further to the winding canal downstream. Why was it called the Nurse Canal? First, this canal was the drinking place for the living and provided cool water for irrigation of the farmlands in the field of reeds. Secondly, this canal was the birth canal of the gods. The sun disk is located right at its outlet. And so the difference between a mortal and a god is that a god is self-consciously immortal, that there's no fear of death. That's my understanding, at least. With the following versions, it becomes obvious that the Nurse Canal was also called the Crossover Canal, the Guide Canal, and the Gorge Canal. The name Crossover Canal reflects the short length of the Nurse Canal connecting the Duat Lake to the Akhet, as shown in figure, let's see.
6.
So the guide canal is, to me, that reminded me of like guiding a child and teaching them as they grow up. There's also called the Looking Canal, and which was another epithet for the Nurse Canal. And I found that interesting because in the Book of Enoch, you have this theme of the Watchers. And so if the juncture between spirit and matter could be seen like an eye, as a portal, as then that could be like a looking place, a place of perspective. Because in a three-world model, that the underworld where you're immersed in what's going on, and you're just kind of caught up in everything. And then you have the realm of the gods where you're so detached and you're not involved in anything. And then you have the middle world where spirit and matter meet, and it's confusing, but at least you're not completely immersed and caught up in what's going on. You have some perspective to make choices. And so that is, to me, it's kind of like the symbol of the eye. Because without having perspective, without having some transcendence, you don't really have a context for what's going on. And then again, if you have no contact, you have no connection, there's no way you know what's going on. You're just oblivious. But if you're caught up in what's going on, and then you're just reacting to everything. Different types of boats in the pyramid texts, including day boat, night boat, sun's boat, God's boat, ferry boat. All the boating ideograms in these names have a lake or canal sign at the bottom. None of them shows the use of a sail. That also suggests that it may have been at this location instead of the Nile where you would use a sail. And here is an illustration showing the type of boat that they would have used with the oars. So they would be rowing through. So they're enacting these rituals, and the layout of the ground, the layout of the mountains, and it tells a story, so that your story is not only found in memorization, but it's geography. Your story is found in this place where you live and the geography around you. And it's related to the Eleusinian fields because of the Greek pronunciation of the field of reeds and the marsh reeds. The field of reeds is a place for purification with the cool water from Jackal Lake. And so the field of reeds is the lake to the east. It's the shallow lake, which resembles the sky. So it, in a sense, symbolizes the metaphysical and death and rest. And so the cool water comes through the canal from the deep lake, which is Jackal Lake, and to the east and to the shallow lake. Greet his entrance into the north of the field of reeds. Let him cross on the winding canal. Let him be transported over to the eastern side of the Akhet. Let him be transported over to the eastern side of the sky. And so you see again, there's this association of the sky with the east, and now I interpret it as the metaphysical. Pyramid texts frequently use parallel sentences to emphasize the same action by using different expressions of the subjective and objective. I sit at the fore of the great shrine and govern every Ak with his mouth equipped. I sit at the lips of Stork Lake and govern every Ak with his mouth equipped. Through this parallelism, it is clear that the great shrine and the lips of Stork Lake are meant to be the same place, which is the sun disk. The same place is also referred to as lips of the winding canal, bends of the winding canal. The Egyptian bird deity Binu is also associated with the sun, recreation, and rebirth. It appears as a perched heron. So you have this association again of something that flies in the air up by the sun. And in a heron, I'll go to the, let me see. The Apis Canal connects Stork Lake with the Mediterranean Sea, resembles the long neck of a bird. So I don't have the illustration here, but you've seen where there's the image of a bull and it resembles the ovaries of a woman. And so that has to do with fertility symbol. And when you have a culture that's growing crops, and it's all about fertility and making sure that everything's watered and grows. Otherwise, they wouldn't survive. And so I'll show you the next illustration where the connection with the Mediterranean Sea resembles the long neck of a bird. I think it's up here towards the top. Now, the stork is also like the bird that's used for the symbol of wisdom. And I forget that at the moment, but there's two different animals associated with the god of wisdom. I think and one of it has a long beak so that it can pick fish out of the lake. And so that reminded me of, air symbolizes the mind. And if you're picking ideas out of the lake, water symbolizes desire, emotion. And so, wisdom is like carefully choosing things and drawing distinctions. So like this type of bird could look down at the water, see the different kinds of fish, and pick and choose things and discriminate. So the marsh was a turquoise color, and it was also known as the Marsh of Turquoise, as well as the Field of Reeds. And because the water was shallow, I'm now off to my place of malachite, and my food is now in the fields of rest and the lakes of turquoise. So you see that the association with the East is with rest, with the metaphysical, and not being involved and tired out by what's going on. The plurality of the fields and lakes indicates that the original shallow megalake was now drained, involved into many farmlands separated by canals and shallow lakes. So what happened as the weather changed, and perhaps they did this to themselves by changing the environment and but this dried out, and so now this is all, it's not there anymore. But because it was a lake bed, it was very fertile farming land, and so by controlling the water flow into the farming land like they do with the Nile, they had a great source of food. Let's see. And so see, the Field of Reeds is a place for the king to get supplies and rejuvenation before joining the gods. So, it's this mind first philosophy. So like in the first line of the Dhammapada, it begins with like all begins in the mind. I'm paraphrasing. But so from the metaphysical, you have an idea, and then that idea manifests in the lake to the west as a result, as a course of action. Let's see. So it's also a place of offering in the center between the two. And I'll just advance. The Winding Canal, as pointed out earlier, the Winding Canal is located downstream of the Nurse Canal, and it goes around the Field of Reeds. When the Nurse Canal is opened up, the Winding Canal is inundated and the Field of Reeds fills with water. Clearly tell that the circular canal is located at the lips of the Winding Canal. I'll go back. You can see that the Winding Canal is down here, downstream of the opening where the water is coming from Jackal Lake. Mentions the Great To and Fro Canal and its mouth shape. Obviously, this is another epithet for the Winding Canal, which has two branches, the north route and the south route. One could ferry from the east to the Akhet via the north branch. One could also sail around the field of reeds through this looped canal. And so, like within our minds, we have lots of options. It's not just unidirectional. There's different ways you could go. This confirms that the winding canal served as the highway for the transportation of offerings from the field of reeds or the field of offerings. So where things were grown, like the crops and everything, you could take that canal back up to where you would make an offering. I'm going to skip that part. But the Apis Canal, Api, it was a bull. Apis is a bull, and it's also associated with the god of earth known as Happy. Let's see. However, this word has a canal determined. Let me go back. I'll just read the whole thing. The Apis Canal. As described in the spell, when the king starts his afterlife, he first passes the Apis Canal before reaching the field of reeds or the winding canal. The rope has been guided, pulled, the beaten path crossed, and the ball struck, gong beaten, at the mouth of the Apis Canal. The shape of the strait from the Gaves Ridge to the field of reeds looks like an Apis bull horn. Frequently appears in the pyramid text. Allen translated it as inundation. However, this word has a canal determinative. Very likely it refers to the same Apis Canal. Most important and highly regarded bull deity of ancient Egypt. His original name in Egyptian is Happy or Hep. Apis is the Greek name. Therefore, we should call the Apis Canal. This is evident in the following verses of the pyramid text. So I'll skip this. The hieroglyph for walled compound is this, a walled place. And what I wanted to emphasize is that it's a circular wall. And in that circular shape is a repetition of the motif of the sun as a disk or location. The Great Immersion is the great celestial or primeval water, but others say that the Great Immersion is the image of the sun's eye at dawn, at his birth daily. So let's see. Here we have the sun at dawn, and that, as we saw earlier, resembles the Ankh symbol, the symbol of eternal life. And that is also where heaven meets earth. You have the metaphysical above, symbolized by the sky, and you have the physical below, symbolized by the waters, and chaos and all that. And the sun right in the middle, that was the location of the city, of the sun disk, of the Ankh. Why was the sun city or the Akhet called the Great Immersion? Very likely this epithet originated from a catastrophic high flood which immersed the Akhet. It was called the flood's immersion. This high flood was clearly the great flood that emerged from the great goddess, Nut. And so we have a flood from the sky, from the heavens, which could be a meteor shower like asteroids and whatnot, like the theories of Graham Hancock, and Halloween being associated with the celestial events. And so that could have caused a catastrophic world event. But we also have the local mountain of Atlas, where the water could have come off the mountain in a very intense storm and flooded the Green Lake and also flooded the whole area. And that's it for this. Does anyone have any comments or questions? I'll stop sharing.
Oops, sorry. Thank you. Truth. There's a lot of information there. First of all, does anyone have any questions, comments? Okay, Malika, go for it.
Hi. Yeah, very fascinating. All the connection that you did, Ruth, with the ocean and the symbol of the animals and all that. And we know that the key to the universe and our inner is represented everywhere in nature, which is very nice. You mentioned Horus, the Eye of Horus, and then I just want to see if you can talk a little more about what is the meaning of the Eye of Horus and also the Eye of Ra, because it's a yin yang, left and right. Ra is the right and Horus is the left. And also, apparently, it's also related to the amount of energy we put from the six senses.
Oh, yeah. So we get our word hours from Horus. And also there was, I think, a ritual, like priestess role that is associated with Horus in keeping track of the hours. And the hours, of course, are in the domain of when things happen. And Horus is associated with the duat, but also with the Eastern Lake as well in another way. I don't remember at the moment how. In any case, in the aspect of Horus being associated with time, we have Kronos and, the reaper of the harvest and everything, the reaper of actions, that you reap what you sow. And so Horus is also the hero archetype also because, the hero faces their fears and, now Ra and Re, I don't know a whole lot about Egyptian mythology. I hope I'm not putting my foot in my mouth, but that sounds more like it's coming off of the sun, like the sun rays. Like it's connected closer to the source. And I read that it has to do with the East.
Yes, correct. The sun god Ra, and yes.
And the eyes, in terms of the eyes, that right and left, right has been associated with the masculine and left with the feminine. And so again, you have the domain of matter in manifestation associated with the green lake in the west with the death. And it's not really death, but it's like, in a sense, it's death to the spirit if you're totally caught up in what's going on.
No, it's interesting. It's correct because yes, the Ra represent the sun and Horus the moon. So it's the yin yang again. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Well, yes, and the moon is quite often associated with the feminine because the moon has cycles. And whereas there's also the worship of the goddess of the dawn, which has the sun and a feminine aspect as well.
Thank you, Truth. Judy.
Yes, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I was wondering if you could comment on the Shakespeare from Julius Caesar, where Cassius is trying to convince Brutus to take Caesar down. And he asks him if he sees himself, and Brutus answers, "No, Cassius, for the eye sees not itself, but is mirrored by reflection." And I think that's quite interesting, as all of Shakespeare is, that we really can't see ourselves except by a mirror, and then we see a reverse. And we see others, although we don't ever see all of the other person. We only going to see a front, backside, or whatever we can see of them. So in a sense, the eye, which is very powerful, I mean, we can look up at the stars and see stars that are millions of light years away, especially, I mean, if we have a telescope, and yet we can't see ourselves. So how much do we really see? I mean, it goes to the limitation of the senses in all cases. So I wonder what you think about that.
Well, there's a quote associated with Blavatsky that what she was seeing in the astral light was twice removed or inverted twice. And so our eyes are seeing upside down. everything we see, it's upside down, and our brain corrects that for it, and for us, it flips over our vision. So it appears to our brain as, by the time it gets to our mind's eye, we're seeing it as upright. So it's no longer upside down. But then our mind is interpreting the information that it gets, and our mind could get it wrong. We could jump to a conclusion, and now it's inverted again. And so there's an expression that we have to invert the inversions, that first we have to purify our minds and stop our minds from being upside down. And then physically, we also have to be aware that the world, we're seeing it upside down. I don't know. That is a tricky question, because I think the answer to that question is just to get a second opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, all the senses are limited, and yet there is also the idea of the pineal gland, the third eye, which, if opened, would give us an enlightenment that none of us could verbalize about now. But our physical senses, like the Dalai Lama said, think of the limit of the senses, then think of the limit of the mind. And of course, as you pointed out, without the mind, we really wouldn't see anything. I mean, the body is the blind king. If we simply see and we don't process, then we don't see anything. It's just a perception. And sometimes, of course, we see something, we don't know what we're seeing.
I read an article. I read an article because I went through a bunch of science stuff that I was going to present. But so about 250 milliseconds before words come out of your mouth, before we say something, we formulate the scan registers something in the brain scans, where it's kind of like a formulation of an image in people's brains. And then when someone hears something, after they hear what the other person says, then they found a similar image generated, so to speak, a pattern in the mind of the listener. And so that is synchronizing brain waves in a sense. So I have an idea. There's a pattern of brain waves in my mind. I say something, and then the other person sympathizes with it, and they generate a similar image and a similar pattern in their brain. And so I've lost where I was going with that, but
Thanks, Ken.
Yes. On two things. First is on the idea of our visual perceptions. The other day, I was in a class, and we were talking about a thing called the Necker cube, Necker, and apparently it's a cube drawn just with lines. So it's like a white background and just black lines. And depending on how you perceive this external cube on paper or on the screen, it can look like the cube has an opening going upwards, or it can look like the cube has an opening going downwards. But the actual thing on paper, it doesn't change at all. What's changing is somehow our mental interaction with this external environment. And so it's a very curious thing about in the Gita, and the Hinduism, we talk about the objects of sense and the organs of sense, and how these are somehow limitations for what we perceive in the world around us, connected to the eye and vision, and really all the five senses. So that was one thing about this Necker cube. You could look it up on the internet. It's just a simple line drawing of a cube in 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. And it's interesting, like those trompe l'oeil foreground background. You might have seen the psychologist tests of like a Rorschach almost, except it's not, where you maybe have a vase and it's 2 faces if you see it one way, but it's a vase if you look at it another way. So it's fascinating how our conscious awareness can have an impact on how we see the world around us. It's quite intriguing. And my other thing, Truth, was a question about the author from UCSD. You were talking early on about the Egyptian goddess Nut and the sky and the stars. And then you mentioned something about a professor that you studied with at UCSD, and she wrote a book about something like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was it was actually Santa Barbara, UCSB. And her name,
OSB, Santa
yeah,
Barbara.
her
Yeah.
name was Barbara Holdridge. And we studied her book as the textbook, and her book was called Veda and Torah.
So it's
And
Yeah,
Veda, like the
I'll
like
send it to you,
Hmm.
Veda, like the Vedas,
the
Veda
Veda.
and Torah.
Okay.
It has
Like
a
the holy books.
subtitle.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So she went through and found all the, how the Kabbalah and, in Egyptian, you have all this iconography, and Catholicism, you have iconography, and then,
Yes.
the statues could be staring at you. That's the impression you get. Is like when we walk in a room and see a painting, is that painting staring at me? And it felt the same way when they designed the statue so that when you walk in a temple, it's this sensory experience. You don't know what's going on. You feel like the walls are staring at you.
Fascinating. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Sure.
Truth, we have two amazing questions and comments in
Okay.
the chat. And I don't know, Jonathan, if you wanted to read what you wrote or have me do it. Or
Truth could read. Truth could read it.
okay,
Yeah. Let me open it up.
okay.
Chat. Trying to find it.
I
Trying to know
can,
where the
if
chat
you'd
went.
like me to.
Please, because
Yeah,
I can't seem to find it.
Taking the speakers of the East being the source of light and the West representing the lit. How might this relate to Plato saying that there is a light that actually comes from the human eye? Plotinus says that in order to see the beautiful, we have to become beautiful within.
Yeah, that light from the eye was known as emission theory. And I was going to present about that. So Rupert Sheldrake talks about that. If you want a fantastic commentary and explanation of emission theory, you really got to listen to Rupert Sheldrake in his interviews.
Is that about the energy that gets actually emitted from the eye rather than just absorbed?
Well, it's not necessarily emitted. It's the idea that through resonance, like it's like a lot of people start with a bottom-up argument, which is to proceed from matter to spirit. And, bottom-up argument would be like, this is the evidence, therefore this is the conclusion. And so you could also start through using your imagination and imagining what it would be like from the other person's perspective. And in that sense, you're going there. You're actually trying to be in a different place, be a different person, have a different perspective, empathize with something which doesn't seem to be your reality. And in that sense, as Rupert Sheldrake explains it very differently, but there's not part of you that's going out and coming back, but there's part of you which is actually there, like distant, not distant from yourself, but it's like, why make the assumption that my consciousness is in my brain? When I have a thought, like, where do those thoughts come from? And what time, what place? Why make the assumption that the place is right here and right now? Because like when you read a book and you come across an idea, it's almost as if you're traveling back in time. And when you reach a new destination, it's almost like it's deja vu, like you were there before. And in a sense, the mind first philosophy of emanation, the idea that something starts in the subtle and then becomes gross, is that the subtlety is not necessarily stuck in one place. It's like the circle whose center is nowhere, whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. You know that quote?
Yes.
So awareness is kind of like that. And so, it technically, as I've been told, this is all happening within our awareness. Awareness is not happening within a physical thing, the physical thing is happening within awareness. So the domain is the domain of awareness in the physical world. Like to an introvert, the world moves through them. To an extrovert, they move through the world.
Oh, interesting.
It's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, it is quite. Yeah, that's a
I
good
don't know if
illustration
you
too.
maybe I got.
Do you have another question, or did you?
No, I wanted to say to you, Des, that there's one more from Maluka. I don't know if.
Oh, okay.
If you
Would you
want
like to read it,
or
Monica?
Maluka, or what? Maybe Maluka wants to read it.
Okay, go for it, Maluka.
Oh, okay. According to the Egyptian, they say that we spend like 1/2 is for smell, 1/4 for sight, 1/8 for thought, 1/16 for hearing, and 1/32 for taste, and 1/64 for touch. This is the amount of time our mind is spent for each of the 6 senses. And each symbol of the eye and Ra and Horus drawing represent the 6 senses. So they have like the dot is the sight, and the eyebrow have to do with thought, and then everything represents something that has to do with the white part of the eye is hearing, and the lower part that is like a little snake represent the taste, and the straight. It have like a straight thing below the eye, and that represents the touch.
I saw
I
that
have a
diagram.
comment.
Go ahead.
I have a yes, thank you. Judy brought up a very important point about phenomena that come to our senses. We interpret it. It's not just because I see blue, you see a different kind of blue. So we interpret what we see, and we make theories. And beyond, that's why we don't get along, because we make theories about what we've seen with the eye or with the smell. These phenomena are very unflecked. They're just in your mind, and you create those mental images from childhood and your experiences and so on. And the brain gets a lot of these ideas, and the brain does some culling because there's too much. And so some of the things that we've seen from the phenomena that we've interpreted, and we think that's it. But the brain, after a while, we learn differently, and then the brain culls some of that, and ultimately, so I see in the political sphere people interpreting things so widely and wildly. I don't know.
Sorry, I had to mute myself there for a moment. I had a siren heading my way. I have a question for you, Truth, and I know you're so good at correspondences, but when I look at the anatomy of the eye and the fact that it turns things upside down against the photosensitive part of I guess it's the cornea in the back. I think about the Sephirah in some ways, because we actually come to a point where everything becomes objective. And I'm sure it happens through more than one portal of sorts, but I wonder if you could speak to that, because I know you're really good with correspondences and that type of thing. But whenever I see the diagram on the eye, it makes me think of the Sephirah and light coming in, but having to do one of these complete reversals of splitting itself from subjectivity to objectivity. Have any thoughts about that?
Well, first, objectivity is like an exaggeration of monism, because when you really focus on the one, let me see, well, in the Jewish tradition, you weren't allowed to pronounce the name of God. And then if you look at the East and Taoism and stuff, all the descriptions of the Tao the Tao that can be named is not the real Tao. I think I have the quote wrong, but that those sort of ideas. So they're really focusing on what the one is, on what one is.
Can we mute everyone, Ken?
I don't know where it's coming. Sorry, I'm just muting.
I have the list of people. I'm going to mute them.
So these traditions that focus on the one, they say that you can't define it. It's indefinable. It's kind of like a center everywhere.
I got muted too.
So in a sense, when you say what it is, it's a failure. It's kind of a failure because when you really get serious about the one, because you're reducing it to one thing. But if you're really serious about oneness, then you get to the point where you can't define it. Like it would be an insult, or you'd be bringing the sacred down. You'd be concretizing this abstract idea, because one is an abstract idea. And so people like to think that what it is, and when they give it a definition, that's one thing, but it's not really one thing. It's part of the plurality. I'm sorry I muted you. Please unmute.
Is things. Wittgenstein, the great philosopher, talked about when we categorize things, we limit ourselves. We limit ourselves to think in that particular category. We make categories because it's human nature. The other thing I wanted to go into was, I forget the lady's name. She talked about the third eye, the eye here, which is the Agna Chakra. And back there, corresponding back there, right there, is behind in the brain is the pineal gland, and the pineal gland secretes many things like serotonin and many others, but it also secretes hallucinogens, and we have that characteristic here. We have to be careful how we the pineal gland. We're doing more research on the pineal gland, but it's one of the things that might help us understand consciousness.
The Egyptians, they're great anatomists. They dissected bodies and everything quite a lot, and so you've seen the illustration, I imagine, where it has a slice of the brain. And it's the pineal gland, and it resembles the eye of Horus.
It's called pineal gland because it is like a pine cone. I didn't know it was the eye of Horus, and that's interesting. And the other thing you said, Truth, which is very important to elaborate on, is the fact that since we categorize the wisest of wise men, like the Vedas, they what is God? Neti. It's not this, it's not that. But they never said what it was. And we're still trying to understand what is God, because we, many religions will not say it's this or that. But as we progress through the years, to make the Vedas simplified for people, we created stories. And those stories have become like traditional law in our mind, but we have to think a little bit. If you think a little bit, you realize that those wise men, without instrumentation, made hypotheses about the world and about what was God, but they were not so easily persuaded to put a finger on it. And this was, if you remember, it was 1500 BCE to 500 BCE, a long time. Nobody, and after that, we've been trying, every scholar, every philosopher, and every neuroscientist are trying to explain these things. And philosophy is trying to explain, what is it? What is God? Is there, and it's very interesting because we've now over the years conceived God, we've made anthropomorphized God into things that look like us?
Well, those are very great comments. The words for God in Western culture, in Greek, theos is from deus, and in dia and dios, all related words. It has to do with daylight. And so it's Adonai is a title which was ascribed to the sun. It wasn't just a title for God, meaning Lord, but it's also ascribed to the sun. And the sun was associated with the king, and the king was the sun god on earth, illuminating the people and providing food and for sustenance. And so lots of words for God had to do with nature.
Yes.
And like words for the self have to do with breathing and wind. So Atma has to do with breathing, spirit has to do with breathing. The word self actually has to do with a forest and a tree, which is an analogy, one among many. And we have Selvin and silver and Selb and like the silver forest. And so lots of these words that we have are references from nature when you think of ourselves and when we think of God. So, each of the gods or goddesses was associated with a star or a constellation or a planet. And so, yeah, one thing I didn't mention, Santos Bonacci has talked about the glands, the pineal gland and whatnot in the chakras in the spine for years, and among other people. But he gives a great explanation of it, about how the fluid moves through the spine and back up. Anyways, one thing I didn't cover was the color blue and purple, and violet, which is associated with psychedelics. And when people take psychedelics, it can change their perspective because it loosens all our categories. And I think you mentioned something like our brain actually naturally produces these mind-altering substances.
It's really interesting that even Darwin, when he was observing and doing all of his experiments on the human eye, he even confessed that it's absurd to propose that the human eye evolved through spontaneous mutation and natural selection. It was a real enigma for him due to its complexity. And it's my understanding that the majority of the neurons that speak, of all the senses that speak to the brain in a way, most of them come from the eye or have to do with the eye. I wonder if that has a lot to do with our evolutionary need to be able to see in order to survive, but not just that. Also, in terms of that light coming through that third eye, that almost like an umbilical cord of sorts, to keep us connected with the mother.
Well, our eyes have more hormones than any other organ in the body, according to an article I read called Is Oculus Rift Sexist? And our eyes, interestingly, see predominantly the hormones influence the eye so that we either see more in terms of motion, parallax, or texture and shading. If you have more feminine hormones, then you'd be seeing more in terms of texture and shading, which is why there's perhaps so many different shades of lipstick, which a lot of guys don't have any idea what the color really is. It's just red to them. And
are men more likely to be colorblind?
Yes, men are more likely to be colorblind from what I read. I hope this isn't a multiple choice test.
We do. Okay, well, Monica, do you have any?
Just wanted to say, Truth, this is just wonderful, and I'm
so
thankful. Yeah, I'm thankful that you gave such a breadth of ideas to us to work with, but to entitle the presentation with 2 words is incredible, and in comparison to how mighty or mightily, that those two words cover. And you were just vast in your presentation. But there are a couple of ideas here, I think from Ken and Miluka, and also Ken again. Ken says the LSD nickname, we're to be reminded, is Purple Haze. You were speaking about that purple violet color earlier. But both Miluka and Ken, I think, have comments or questions about iridology. So Ken, you want to go first? I saw that one first.
Do you mind if I just mention as a reference that the foremost scholar on that topic is Dr. Amon Hillman, who is a scholar of Greek medical texts as well as religion. And so he talks a lot about the color purple and how a lot of hallucinogenic plants have a violet color to them. And, that in the Eleusinian mysteries and different mysteries, like there's the Immortality Key book of Brian Marescu, which goes into that as well. And these mysteries that people went through, these rituals, they lost their fear of death is one of the things that occurred. And so that can't be so bad.
What is iridology?
Yeah, Dr. Amon Hillman, who's got a YouTube channel called Lady Babylon, is a great source on that topic.
I'm reading parts of it here, and it's being asked, does anybody have an idea of what it is? But iridology detects the illness of some inner organs like kidneys, etc. The white part of the eye also changes color as well as turns light yellow. The nails also reflect the health of a person. Let me see if there's more to this.
Well, I read an article a couple of weeks ago about dementia, that they could use iridology to help detect dementia early.
Oh.
Fascinating. Yeah, I don't know much about it. I've just heard of it lately. I mean, I've just encountered a therapist close to where I live. Yeah.
So Ken, the color of the eye on the.
Actually, there seems to be correspondences like reflexology to different parts of the physical body, go to different parts of the iris, sort of like different parts, you might say, of our cerebral cortex for visual cortex connects to other parts of the body too.
Ken, I wonder, it's getting a bit late, but
yes.
You had mentioned the connection between schizophrenia and dementia, and that schizophrenia has been described as like an early onset dementia. Yes. If they can detect dementia from the eyes, then do you think they may be able to detect schizophrenia?
That's a fascinating question. I will check in with this this guy in Lemon Grove here, the iridologist, and then maybe look online. I've not ever heard of that as being a way to make the diagnosis. However, there are retinal changes in some people with schizophrenia, so they actually have distortions in their visual perception because of the physical retina is abnormal in some of them, a subpopulation of people with schizophrenia.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for everyone's questions. I apologize for the haphazard nature in which I still have a lot to improve upon in terms of my ability to do a presentation.
Oh, I think the verbal part that you did, that was amazing. So no, you're wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, don't worry about anything like that. You did just fine. And we really do appreciate all the work you put in. We know that doing these presentations isn't just a real easy task. People put a lot of their heart and soul into them and spend hours upon hours, learning as well as presenting. So it's we are so appreciative of all the time that people spend to share what they've learned with us. So yes, we humbly appreciate everything you've shared with us today, Truth. And if there's no more questions, is there I know it's getting a little late.
I don't see any more hands raised. You, Monica? No?
No, I think
All
we're
right.
done. So I guess this is it. But thank you, everyone, for coming. And we hope that you will come back and be with us here at ULT San Diego again next week. Once again, I'll say the title of the presentation is Shanti. So we hope that you will come and be with us.
Who is the one doing Shanti next week?
That will be Wes Amerman.
Okay, thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Everybody have a wonderful evening. Be well and safe. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste. Bye-bye all.
Bye-bye.